All right. Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us this afternoon for our webinar, Inside Emergency Management. I'm going to stop sharing my screen, and I hope that you guys can all see my camera now. I'm Melissa Egan. I'm the Community Relations Officer here at TEMA, and I'll be guiding us through today's conversation with TEMA Director Patrick Sheehan and Putnam County Emergency Management Director Brandon Smith. This is the first year August is being recognized as Emergency Management Awareness Month. So we thought it would be the perfect time to share more about the important work your emergency management teams do at the state and local level. So first, I'd just like to welcome Director Sheehan and Director Smith. Thank you guys so much for joining us today.
Thank you. Honored to be a part of the conversation.
All righty. Well, before we get started, I do want to give you a better idea of what to expect over the next half hour. We have some questions ready for our directors, but we encourage you to ask those questions as well. You can put them in the chat. I will be monitoring the chat during this conversation, and we will work to get them to them as time allows. We will keep this webinar to 30 minutes. But again, if you have a question that pops up, I will be monitoring the chat throughout the conversation. So we'll either stick that question in as our directors are already talking about a topic, or we will hold it till the end. If we don't get to your question, I will make sure that we follow up with you after the conversation. This webinar is being recorded, and it will be posted on our YouTube channel as well as shared on our social media after. So if you enjoy the conversation, you want to share it with your network, please feel free to. So without further ado, let's get right into this. Emergency managers are problem solvers, helping communities understand their risk, build resilience, navigate crisis, and know what to do when disaster strikes. So let's start with the basics here. Director Sheehan, what exactly is emergency management?
Melissa, I kind of think you just touched on it, right? So there's some very textbook definitions, right? So emergency management is a framework of continuously evaluating hazards, working to mitigate them, prepare for them, coordinate the response to them, and coordinate and shepherd the recovery from them. But I think at its core, government emergency management is pulling people together, recognizing that disasters happen. They're not one-offs. They happen with some regularity. There are things that we can do to reduce their impact. There are things we can do to prepare and build capabilities. And then we can make sure that the citizens, Tennesseans, have the best coordinated response that we can give them, and that we can be there shoulder to shoulder with them as they recover. And that kind of is at every level of government. Brock Long, my friend, that was the former FEMA administrator, talks about it, emergency management in the United States being locally executed, state-led, and federally supported. So when we're talking about government emergency management, those kind of frameworks, I think, apply.
And Director Smith, at the local level, is that perspective or expectation any different for you?
I don't think so. I think the expectation is the same. And of course, all disasters begin and end locally. We know that a disaster or crisis happens, and the 911 center there in the local community is the first warning point. It's the first notification that's made. And so at the local level, we have to be ready, once the 911 center calls and says, this is a little bigger than something we normally deal with, we have to have those plans in place to be ready, know how we're going to assess the situation, figure out how big is it, how bad is it, what are the impacts that come from it, what are the resources that we need, what are the resources we need that we have, what are the resources we don't have, that we need some help finding those resources. That's one of the many ways that TEMA comes into the picture for us. And then what does the public need to know, right? There's a huge expectation, and I think it's bigger now than ever, that the public wants to know the most up-to-date information as quickly as we can give it to them. So having the system in place locally where we can get that information gathered together, put it in a format that is understandable to the public without causing unnecessary public panic.
Yeah, of course. And, we work in emergency management, so we have that idea of every day coming in, and whether it be blue skies or gray skies, understanding how we operate. But as you both have mentioned, it's something that maybe not everyone is so, educated in or just aware of. You see your firefighters going down the street. You see your police officers on patrol all the time. You don't necessarily always see emergency management professionals out there until something impacts you. I'm going to throw this out for both of you guys. You can pick who wants to go first, but are there any common misconceptions in emergency management?
I think there are a lot of misconceptions about emergency management. So I think some of it just is a lack of awareness, right? And we live in a busier world, a noisier world than we did even a decade ago, and it makes it harder for people to be informed. But I think most people don't realize that our nation's emergency management system is multi-tiered. So there's a local component. There's a local emergency manager covering almost every county in the United States of America. And a lot of times those offices are under-resourced, and that people can volunteer for a lot of those offices and be a part of making sure that their communities are readier. I think Director Smith I know has volunteers that have engaged with them, and he's done a lot with volunteer efforts in response, unaffiliated volunteers in response to the disasters of 5.5 years ago, for instance. But I think that it starts with people just don't even know that there's a county emergency management office. A lot of folks don't understand that there's a state emergency management office. And, FEMA as a brand, I think is pretty powerful. Maybe that crowds some of these things out so that people don't realize always that there's a TEMA or, for years, my own mother thought that I worked for FEMA, and I've never worked for the federal government a day in my life outside of military service. So, just it's hard to crowd out those what people think they know sometimes.
Yeah, I agree, and I think your points are spot on. I think a lot of people really believe that TEMA and FEMA, and even at the local level, but especially once TEMA and FEMA get involved in a disaster or a crisis response, that they're just going to show up with big trucks and big checkbooks and solve all the problems, and that's just not how it works. Our state and federal partners are just that. They're partners in the response. Most of our district coordinators live in our communities, so they're part of it, and they know the same people that we know. Our district coordinators are our TEMA representatives that are in our communities. And so I think a lot of folks don't understand that it begins at the local level. It's our responsibility as the local emergency manager, and this is probably the biggest weight, I would say, is that it's our responsibility to make sure that we get the resources that we need, whether we get those locally or we reach out to our state and federal partners, that when we do that, we have to explain exactly what we need so that we get the right resource. That's something we have a lot of discussion around, is making sure we get the right resource to fix the problem that we need to have fixed. And you can spend a lot of time and money and effort getting a resource that doesn't solve the problem if you didn't do a good job of explaining what you needed to happen in the first place. So that's one thing that I would say, is that most folks, I feel like they think the state and federal government are just going to show up and they're going to take over and fix the problems. And that's not the case. That many times I have pictures, literally have a picture of Director Sheehan and I standing shoulder to shoulder here in this emergency operations center, and working through a tornado that we experienced several years ago. And that's what every response has been. We're shoulder to shoulder with our state and federal partners and working through that. So our job is to coordinate the resources that are coming in, make sure that everybody has the information they need to respond effectively. Like Director Sheehan said, you see the fire, police, EMS rolling down the road. Our job is to make sure they have the things that they need to do the job that they have to accomplish.
Yep. And staying at the local level here, Director Smith, you've worked several disasters here in Tennessee and also throughout the state, at your local level, throughout the state and outside of the state. What have you learned from the disasters as a whole, a specific disaster, and how have you been able to apply that to what's going on right now in Putnam County, or potentially to future recovery if or when that time comes?
Yeah, I mean, there's always there are lists and buckets of lessons learned on every disaster, and I think that's true for anybody, no matter how long they've been in, because no two disasters are the same. That's something Director Sheehan says a lot, that no two disasters are identical, and we have to be ready for those curveballs. But the biggest thing I would say that I've learned in Tennessee is that we have an amazing community of emergency managers. We all know each other fairly well. Most of us have each other's cell phone numbers, and it's not uncommon if you're having one of those days where your local event has made the news to get a text from another emergency manager, be it at the state level or one of the county emergency managers, just checking on you. Hey, how you doing? Do you need anything? Is there anything I can get for you? I can be there in 45 minutes or whatever the answer may be. So I think that's probably the biggest thing that I've learned. And it's a small community of tight-knit folks who will do just about anything to help each other out in our moment of need.
Director Sheehan, we'll toss this one over to you. I know that we've all been working together before in the EOC and in your experience here in Tennessee. What are some of the main lessons that you've taken that you are now using daily or future recovery wise?
Yeah, so I think like on the wall behind me here is something that says speed is the killer competency. So the thing that differentiates us from being successful or being perceived as successful or not is how quickly we meet a need. And you can't just ramp up slowly to meet the needs of a disaster or an emergency as it's unfolding. You need to be ready to be there with it. And you need to get ahead of it to the extent that you can. And knowing that things are going to unfold differently, our plans will be wrong in some way. Something, the real world is more complex than the model that we use to put our plans together. And having, here in the State Emergency Operations Center, we pull together expertise from across the enterprise of state government, from the private sector, from our local emergency management partners, from volunteers. So just other subject matter experts, depending on what's happening, so that we can anticipate and figure out how things might cascade and how we can get ahead of those things and mitigate them to the extent possible. And so, we work a lot here in the state of Tennessee on being organized so that we can move quickly when things are unfolding, especially if they don't unfold like as we think they might. So, we get to play a little bit of jazz sometimes and try to be agile and meet those needs as they unfold.
We have a question from Matthew. I think it's a great tie-in here. He asks, what are some examples of lesser used resources that were beneficial in emergency events?
One that immediately comes to mind for me is our Tennessee Army National Guard air assets. We're doing some training actually coming up very soon here in the Upper Cumberland with those folks. And the type of helicopter that you need or the type of resources you need on the helicopter or what you need the helicopter to do. If that helicopter is going to carry a Bambi bucket with water to extinguish a fire, that's a little bit different than I need a rescue swimmer on a hoist. So that's one that immediately comes to mind, that are assets we use or we coordinate with often, whether we use them often or not, that you have to be really specific for exactly what you need that to do well before you call for it, so that the right division or the right unit is sent from across the state.
Yeah, so for me, the aviation assets, we're using them almost every day. Certainly every week we're using National Guard aviation assets to do something, support something in the state. So I don't think of that as a lesser used resource. For me, I think about the specialty teams we're building. So I had the honor yesterday of being in Chattanooga, where we were presenting their credentialed for accrediting their Swiftwater rescue team, right? And since their validation exercise in June, they've done more than a dozen Swiftwater rescues. Last week, they had the flash flood event that inundated I-24, and these multi-jurisdictional, multidiscipline teams that are built around capabilities. So Brandon served on an incident management team in different places. We sent a number of incident management teams to support the most impacted communities from Tropical Storm Helene. Those things don't get used every day. But when you need them, it's too late to build them. And so we have really, in the last decade, invested a lot of effort in building these kinds of capabilities that we know from our experience will make a tremendous difference. If you talk to Mayor Grandy, Mayor Woodby, Mayor Eberly, like, they'll talk about how big a difference these incident management teams that I've briefed them on before at county mayors meetings, but it's all very notional until you need it. And people that know the ordering process for resources, people that are selfless, don't have an ego, and are there to support them, much like TEMA. Our statutory mission is to support the county mayor and the county emergency manager to the extent that we can, and support them in their management of their particular part of the disaster. And these incident management teams were tremendous in that. These Swiftwater rescue teams, we deploy Swiftwater rescue teams almost every year in support of our fellow Americans when they're faced with tropical storms or hurricanes or other flooding events. And those lesser used resources take a lot of time and effort to organize, to train, to equip. to staff up. And not any one jurisdiction really can have most of these capabilities. So by working together regionally, with our neighbors, we get to build capabilities that otherwise are not going to be available to any of us. And, Ryan Thompson and the team here at TEMA are working with our local partners to build more of these capabilities and find better ways to sustain them and bolster them, because we're going to need more of them, I think.
Yeah, and now I'd like to shift, as you mentioned, to looking forward, right? Building those teams of what we'll need in the future, those assets, those resources. Is there anything specific that you would like to see for emergency management in the future? Director Sheehan or Director Smith, you can feel free to hop in.
Yeah, so I think, there's a lot of discussion right now in our nation around what emergency management should be, right? So I think a lot of the discussions around FEMA's failings are actually failings of our nation's emergency management system. So most of the time when, and I'm very point of the spear engaged, I'm the principal liaison for FEMA in the state of Tennessee when we're doing most things. So I get to see what's working and not working. A lot of times what FEMA gets tagged with or blamed with are problems not in FEMA itself, but in problems in how we fund and how complex our nation's emergency management system is. And I think some of the discussions going on right now, some of the review committee things, as scary as they might seem to people in our craft, in our profession, are long overdue discussions around solving some of these problems that have seemed intractable. So making the Stafford Act a little less cumbersome, making it clearer what will be funded and not funded, making it clearer what will qualify for federal disaster aid or not. I think we're going to see some of those things come up. But I think regardless, we're going to have to see state governments step up. And, Governor Lee in this administration, Governor Haslam before, stepped up in some pretty big ways in investing in our state's emergency management system, which isn't just TEMA, it's TEMA and the 95 county emergency managers, management agencies, to be able to bolster some of these capabilities. And I think we're going to see more of that. I quite frankly think some of our counties and cities should probably look more at investing in supporting their county emergency managers. There is a clear difference to me in the aftermath of a disaster, which jurisdictions are investing in their county emergency management agencies, not just their director, but the other things that go around them, the support mechanisms, the deputy directors, that make a tremendous difference in how quickly you can respond to the disaster and get ahead of it.
And Director Smith, before we go to you, we do have a question in the chat that I think is relevant to some of the comments Director Sheehan just made. Director Sheehan, do you foresee federal grants with reasonable application periods for state and local partners becoming more prevalent in the future?
I'm not sure what the grants are going to look like, Alex. There's discussions around block granting that'll give more flexibility to the states to make decisions on how to use these. But I think it's too early yet to know. I think a law to follow right now that's been introduced on a bipartisan basis by the chairman and the ranking member of the House T&I Committee, Transportation and Infrastructure Committee, which has oversight over most of the disaster programs under FEMA. Their bipartisan bill is the FEMA bill, the Fixing Emergency Management for America Act. That probably has the clearest path to actually getting enacted. But I think some of the things that'll come out of the FEMA review committee and will also come into play. So it's worth, I think, tracking that bill. I think anyone that knows me knows that I think predictions are never right. So we can forecast a range of potential outcomes. So there will be changes in grants. I can't say whether there'll be more grants or less grants. I don't know what reasonable application periods mean. So I think we'll see them get shorter. I think they'll see them be more targeted, perhaps, other than block grants. And I don't know if they'll become more or less prevalent. I think we have way too many programs out there. There's like 39 grant programs that have to deal with disaster recovery, 39 agencies and like 90 programs, not all of which get funded all the time. That complexity is unwieldy. No one can know all of them all the time. No one person can, if that's all they're doing. And that's a disservice to our nation, to our states, to our communities, and makes it too hard for some counties who have a half-time person shop to try to compete for these funds. You need a professional grant writer. One of the things I have liked most seeing out of this administration, this Trump administration, is the requirement that grants be written in a way that doesn't require a professional grant writer. So I hope to see more of that. So where the uses and the ability to justify it doesn't require an advanced degree.
All right, thank you, Director Sheehan. And Director Smith, I want to go back to just looking ahead. Is there anything that you would like to see in emergency management, either at the local level, state, nation as a whole, moving forward?
I think just the same thing Director Sheehan said about the state funding, seeing states step up. I think we need to see the local communities do the same. And you hit the nail on the head when you said you can go into a community following a disaster and you can tell which ones are supported and funded, because they typically take less time and less work to make things happen. A lot of those things are already in place. I'm very fortunate with my mayor, Mayor Porter, and the county commission in Putnam County. They have always supported emergency management, and I think it shows in a lot of what we're able to do and be prepared for our communities. But many communities aren't that fortunate. So I think seeing just local communities step up and make that investment as well, just like on the grant side of things, I think we have to find local ways to achieve some of those same goals, if possible, rather than relying on those state and federal grants coming down the pike, because we just don't know what's next. So we're still learning that, and I agree that it's time for some remodification of some of those programs for sure.
Staying focused on the local community aspect, Kathy Joe asked, do you have an example of a community agency that excels at emergency preparedness? Director Smith or Director Sheehan?
I think it depends on what their mission is. I think there are several who excel in their mission or in their mission area. A few that come to mind, we're pretty tight with our American Red Cross chapter here in Cookeville. Team Rubicon is another one of those organizations, but then there are also those homegrown community organizations, like our Putnam County Volunteer Organization. Director Sheehan spoke to that, spun up after the tornado in response to the sheer number of volunteers we had. So I think Tennessee shows up and they show out when our communities need it the most. And you see so many of those different organizations step up and fill the gaps and fix the problems in our time of need.
Director Sheehan, you have anything to add?
Yeah, I think, there's an array of, I'm thinking at it as from a county perspective, right? So Williamson County, from a wealthier county perspective, does a great job of communicating with the public. I think Director Smith's organization does a great job of reaching out and communicating to help people understand preparedness. So there's a broad array of rural and urban and suburban communities in the state that do a good job, but it's hard to just pick out one. But I know Director Smith and the Putnam County team does a great job.
Sure. So we hosted this conversation in August, as it is the inaugural Emergency Management Awareness Month, for everyone to really get an inside look at what emergency management is. We have about 5 minutes left. I'm going to just ask both of you a very general question here, not only as we're in August with Emergency Management Awareness Month, but we are knocking on the door of September, which is National Preparedness Month, a big month for emergency management and making sure their community is prepared. So with just about 5 minutes left here, is there anything that you want Tennesseans to know when it comes to their local communities, emergency management as a whole, being prepared? If there's one piece of advice you would like to give, what would that be? Don't all speak up at once.
Yeah, I can go. I think the biggest thing is get connected with your emergency management agency, get connected with your local folks. We're all pretty easy to reach 24 hours a day if you absolutely need us. But most emergency management agencies or offices of emergency management, whatever that looks like, whether it's city or county based, have a way for people to get involved, to volunteer, as well as to get preparedness tips. So connect on social media, connect via the website. So a lot of us have our own apps that you can download. TEMA, is no exception to those same nodes. But just get connected and get involved and learn all that you can, and understand that personal responsibility to be prepared is each of our responsibility for our own homes and our own families.
Yeah. So for me, 20 some odd disasters, seeing the impacts to households and families, and no aid program today or in the future will meet every need of a survivor. So make sure your insurance coverages are right. So there's not any all peril coverage in the United States of America. There's not been all peril coverage for homeowners in my lifetime. So, earthquake insurance is a separate peril. Flood insurance is a separate peril. So if you live in a floodplain, whether or not you have a federally backed mortgage, you should have a flood insurance policy. And, it doesn't have to be complete coverage, but something will help. I think we've done ourselves a disservice how we talk about flood risk, that if someone's in a floodplain, it's 1% or 100-year. In the real world, what that means is that over the life of a 30-year note, there's a 27% chance you're going to file a claim for flood damage. And so having flood insurance, if you're in those areas especially, is important. And flood insurance, if you're not in an area zoned as a floodplain, is relatively affordable. So for a couple $100s a year, you can have increased peace of mind for either the structure itself or for contents. And those are two separate components of a policy there. But just doing things like that can go a long way to easing your suffering if you find yourself, unfortunately, caught up in a disaster. So way too few people have insurance coverage that can help. And, FEMA administrators for the last decades have talked about insurance as being one of the legs of resilience. And it's one that's oftentimes missing in people's portfolios. It's not something we can do for them. It's something they have to do for themselves. And, I would encourage people to, most communities in the state of Tennessee participate in the National Flood Insurance Program. We're down to just not even quite a handful of communities that don't. Pay attention to what that means, right? Because communities can take actions to participate in a community rating system that buys down their premium rates. That can get them a discount on what their NFIP policy. Those are things that have to be done at the community level, the participating community level. They're not things we can do for them. They're not things that FEMA can do for them. They're not things they can do themselves, but those are things that, if they're engaging with their commissions, their zoning boards, their Board of Aldermen, there are things that those communities can do to buy down the cost of insuring against that risk, and highly recommend that folks take a look at that and supporting that.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much. We have hit that 30-minute mark right on the nail here. So I wanted to thank both Director Sheehan and Director Smith for taking time out of your schedule and for joining us on this conversation. I am going to share my screen real quick. We here at TEMA have been hosting these webinars monthly. We do our best to share important topics, timely topics, and just have a really casual conversation about how emergency management is supporting Tennesseans and what you can know. So if you have any topics that you'd like to potentially hear about, or if you would like to pitch us an idea and have someone who wants to share some information, feel free to reach out to me. You can always contact us either at my email address or temainfo@tn.gov. And again, this webinar was recorded. It will be updated or posted, I should say, on our YouTube channel within the next few hours or so. So feel free to go on there. If you'd like to review this webinar again, feel free to. If you'd like to share it with your network, we encourage that as well. But again, just thank you so much for joining us this afternoon, and have a great rest of your week.
Thank you, Melissa. Thank you, Brandon.
Thank you both.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye. Thank you, guys.